Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Stephanie Renée. I am the curator of the Photographic Memory exhibit. We have two of the images from the exhibit here, and I'll talk about them with Dr. Blockson in just a bit. But as a part of this exhibit that's presented in conjunction with the Slought Foundation and Penn's School for Social Policy and Practice, I've put together about 70 images from my great uncle, Maurice Sorrell, who was the first credentialed black photographer for the White House News Photographers Association, as well as a 31-year photographer for Johnson Publications. And so at this moment in 2018 is 20 years since his passing. And so it seemed an appropriate time to have a conversation about what we've been able to capture, the beauty of black culture, of black history, and to coordinate Q&A sessions as a part of the exhibit that speak to the importance of our archival history, collective history, and how each of us have a role in contributing to that process. And so there's no way that I could talk archives or black history or just the beauty of black existence without trying to secure some commentary and some insight from the gentleman sitting next to me. I have been an on-air personality at WURD for the last 6.5 years. And in that time, I have had numerous occasions to call on the expertise of Dr. Charles L. Blockson and to get his insight into new publications that are available that help to recount our history, but more importantly, the living history that he's been able to capture here in his own collection on Temple's campus, and why that's necessary. So that's the conversation I would like to have with you today, sir, if that's okay with you.
Okay with me.
And we're going to, I know you might have some folks kind of moving around to make sure that we've got good level coming in from you from the PA system so that we can capture this and share it with people who aren't able to be with us today. But I wanted to just start our conversation by asking you, because I know you started very early, what was the spark that made you decide you needed to start collecting pieces that talked about our history?
I grew up in Norristown, the county seat in Montgomery County, 18 miles from Philly. And in those days I was in the 4th grade. And I asked my teacher, when we were studying about the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Jefferson, and others, and I raised my hand, asked my teacher, the Negro, or colored people, or colored as we were called, have a history. She said, no, Charles, Negroes were born to serve white people. So that started me. So I went home, told my parents, and they said, no, we do have a history. My father always, he had his own business, whitewashing, plastering, and painting. And he, on the side, he would collect novels, doing that of Claude McKay and other, Langston Hughes was one of his favorites. Chester High. So I came up with them. He also was a member of the local NAACP. And then also, every weekend after we finished working, he would send me to the store. He would pick up the store on Main Street in Norristown, owned by a West Indian person, who would every week they would have the Tribune, Philadelphia Tribune, the Amsterdam News, Chicago Defender, Baltimore Afro-American newspaper. So I grew up, in spite of what my teacher told me, that we didn't have a history. So I began to read. And every Sunday or so, my grandfather would come by after church. He was a founding member of the Solomon Baptist Church. My ancestor at the time I didn't know was connected with the Underground Railroad. I was young. So he would sing every Sunday after dinner in our backyard. And he would sing the spirituals. Later I would realize as I grew older, they were coded spirituals. He said, our people came from Delaware originally from Accomack County, Virginia, one of the old slave owners moved from African County, Virginia to the Sussex County, Delaware. And why Sussex County important to our history? I didn't know at the time who else lived there for a while. Richard Allen, Reverend Richard Allen, and Reverend Epsilon Jones. But at the time I didn't know. So anyhow, they escaped. So he used to sing, there's a highway to heaven, there's a highway to heaven, walking up the King's Highway. That's one of his favorite spirituals. I didn't realize it until I got older. That song was part of the Underground Railroad. The highway to heaven meant the highway from the southern area of even far down to Georgia. Some of our ancestors went to the Caribbean on the Underground Railroad. There are many routes, but most of them involved a woman by the name of Harriet Tubman. I knew about Frederick Douglass because my grandfather and my mother, she was the only child. My father had one brother. So my uncle, when he came up from Wilmington, North Carolina, Wilmington is very important in our history. He goes up to the riots they had there and so forth. Highly educated people who owned half of the town, but he moved to Norristown, but he couldn't teach. I never had an African American teacher in my life, grade school, high school, junior high school, or college. But my uncle he would have books. He would figure. What I mean by figure, I don't care who you were. If you were a minister, or bartender, mother, nurse, grandmother, everybody played the numbers. Everybody played the numbers. What's the hit today? We had a numbers man. So that was part of our culture. So my uncle, great uncle, my mother, who raised my mother, my aunt Annie, my mother's name for her, she had the mixture of our family, the African American family. Her hair, that was amazing. It went down to her back when she was combing out. Because she had the Cherokee, Native American, Caucasian ancestors. So we had that mixture. So anyhow, my uncle would talk about a man I was young, even before I moved down to Lafayette Street in Norristown, when we were in his house. He would always talk about W.E.B. and Booker T. I was young, I didn't know who they were. W.E.B. what? Du Bois. And Booker T. who? Washington. He had books. He couldn't teach here in the Norristown area, but he was one room school teacher. In the South, they knew their history. They had all the heroes. So when the teacher told me that we didn't have a history, I knew. Then something told me to go out to Salvation Armies and Goodwill stores. Now most people during that days in the early 40s, mid 40s, the Salvation Armies, people went there for clothes and others. I used to go to Salvation Army for books because people would move or whatever, they have special books there. And every now and then I would see a book that said something about a black person. One day I remember I picked up a book, Their Eyes Are Watching God. Their Eyes Are Watching God. I was curious of the title. Thornhill who? Hurston. And guess what today? Her latest book is being republished.
That's right.
What's the name of it?
Barracoon.
Barrack, about what? The slave trade. So you see how then I was an athlete from junior high school, and college. Everywhere I went, we played various areas. I would go to the bookstores. Even at Penn State, my two former teammates, Rosie Greer and Lenny Moore, who played at Penn State. We would go to parties in New York City, the Boston area. In those days, there was a quota of an African American athlete. I had a football and track scholarship. Rosie had football and track. Rosie was a year ahead of me. Lenny Moore was ready. I played against Lenny. So we were rivals, but at Penn State we became roommates. Then there was another great athlete, African American, by the name of Jesse Arnell, became a great attorney. And Penn State had more African Americans during that period than any other college or university. There was a quota. I also had the opportunity to play against a great guy who became a great football player and a great actor by the name of Jim Brown. So that was my era. So getting back to the story, everywhere we traveled, Rosie and Lenny was in Greenwich Village, in Harlem, where we had played in New York. They would go to parties. I would go to bookstores. Down in the village, up in Harlem, I loved, first time I heard of Harlem. I heard of Harlem coming up to my father reading, other people talking in the barbershop. So I had the opportunity to go to, I won the National Indoor Shot Put Champion at Madison Square Garden in high school. Then I said, well, I'm in New York. I heard about Harlem. So how did I get to Harlem? I was where in Madison Square Garden located. Then I remember what my mother's favorite singer was Ella Fitzgerald. Mm-hmm. Take the A train to Harlem with Duke Ellington. And that's why so I took the A train, got off at 125th Street, and then I walked to go to the street. And there was a bookstore, the National Memorial Bookstore. Mm-hmm. It became part of my life. Every time I participated in sports or whatever, even when I wasn't playing sports, I would come from Norristown, 18 miles from Philly, get on the train, go up to New York, take the A train to Harlem, then I would go to the bookstore. And one day I was in the bookstore, guess who walked in? A man by the name of Langston Hughes.
Oh my God.
So I had his books and all, my father had his books in the library and all that. So I was just proud, I was just stunned. He was humble. And later, he was instrumental in donating a portion of his collection to Lincoln University. So I had that background. Then later, speaking of Zora, I attended the first Zora near Hurston Festival they had down in Eatonville. Mm-hmm. So this was her home. So I heard of all these names before. So when my teacher told me, she didn't know. Later on, strange how things happened. My senior year at Penn State, I got a letter saying that she was coming to Penn State for a conference. She said, Charles, I want to apologize to you because you told us all something. She said, I didn't know. We were told that Negroes were born to serve white people. So all that goes around comes around. So that got me into collecting. So I started collecting here and there, even when I was in the service at Fort Dix. Then later I went overseas. I didn't do too much soldiering. Then I had a chance to play the New York Giants. I turned that down. People said, you're crazy. You turned down the New York Giants? So I said, well, I'll get my Army career over. I went overseas. I even collected books and documents in Japan. I've been all over the world. Scandinavia, even in Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, Paris. There's all the book malls, and in Paris, you go there, there's so much. Shakespeare and Company Shakespeare and Company was a bookstore. And during the 20s, all my great hero, I can't forget him, Paul Robeson. Ever since I was a child, my father and mother had his records, spirituals, and music of his great friend, Sweet Mama Stringbean. Who was that? Sweet, come on, don't shake your head. That's the Waters. Oh, yeah. She was a good friend with Paul Robeson. She was born where? Chester. She lived where? Here in Philly. Sweet Mama Stringbean, that's the water. She was an actress, dancer, singer, and so forth.
You didn't know this was going to be a quiz, did you?
I always do that. You do your homework, but one of them said she's important. She was a good friend of Paul Robeson. Matter of fact, she had Paul Robeson pose for his bust. I have the original bust of his, my other collection at Penn State. I have a collection up there too. But I made my name, his picture is right in this room. We're on the way out, you look and see his picture. Antonio Salemi. He was 98 years old when he did a bust of me. He did one about Ethel Waters. Mary Lou Williams, know who she was? Did one of her. And she did the statue of Robeson, the new statue. Tony had me pose 35 times. So one day he said Paul Robeson Jr. came up to Easton where he was living with his wife. He was 98 years old. He used to have parties in the Vista St. Berlin and others in the village in the 20s. And he did his bust later of President Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Paul Robeson, House of Waters. Then one day he said, Charles, Paul Jr. wanted me to do another bust of his father. He said, take your clothes off. He said, I want to repeat the nude statue I did of Paul back in 1925. I said, but Tony, my athletic days, my body's not the same, just take them off. So I posed for the same statue that Paul Robeson posed for. The statue has a story of its own. When he first completed it, it was offered for a show at the annual art festival in Philadelphia. What do you call it, the Washington Square Art Festival? It still goes on, doesn't it?
Art Alliance.
The Art Alliance, yeah, they still have it every new year. So the open-minded people in Philly, and when Tony said, when I submitted the statue of Paul, the new statue, they said, oh, we can the Negroes of Philadelphia who couldn't accept that. So he said, well, send us another statue. So he said, guess what I did? I said, what? I sent him a statue of a white woman, a nude, and they did it. Then the statue went to New York City, Union Lake, they refused it. Chicago, and later he sent it to Paris and won first prize. During the war, World War II, Tony said it was lost. But in the meantime, he did another one that was down in Florida. But that was destroyed or something. So he had the photographs that Carl, you know who Carl Van Vechten was?
Yes.
Well, he was a good friend of Tony. He said Carl Van Vechten took photographs of the Robeson. So he had me pose for it using the photograph. So what I'm saying to you, my book collecting has led me all kinds of ways, you know, all over. Like I said, to walking down in the streets of Japan or at a track meet, going to bookstores to see writings by Langston Hughes there in Japan. I have the original of his. The oldest book we have here is 1500s. Another book, I fell in love with her. Anytime I cried over her. So one day I was able to afford her. Well, the woman by taking the young girl from Senegal, she brought here on the ships of horror, brought to Boston area. Every time I think of Philly, because Philly was a part of it. When I lived was the last year and a half ago, when I placed that marker at Penn Landing, the Seaport Museum of the Pennsylvania Slave Trade, I thought of this young woman and others right here in the so-called city of brotherly love. And sister what?
Affection.
Which is a damn lie, well, even today. So we need a marker. I was involved in placing the other markers around, but I cried. I paid for the marker myself. People paid for the pull. So when you celebrate Penn Landing, it sort of teased me off. You know, now they begin to wake up. Remember when at Penn Landing, is where they brought our ancestors in chains,
Yes.
shackles. There still need to be another marker at the site between High Street, 3rd Street, 4th Street. What was there? It was old slave corral where they herded our people in like animals. Right here in Philadelphia, there need to be a marker there. There need to be a marker I was involved with. I'm skipping over, but they all come together. For 3 years, controversy that divided the community. My late friend, he's not here anymore, but his spirit is here, was a part of it. Reggie Bryant,
Yes.
he was a part of our group. Another person you hear every now and then, Stephanie, you hear him, you speak to him sometime, Reverend Joe Williams, who was on our committee, with the so-called President House. They divided our community in half. An African-American woman by the name of Martha Aiken, the first African-American superintendent, and they gave her hell because she didn't recognize at the time. We wanted a marker. Another woman, affairs fighter, always give women credit. Takari Rose, you know who she is?
Yes.
She was on our side. So I organized the first march in slavery. I said, we're going to have this march from the Penn Landing, the river, from the river through Philly, through past the so-called President House, because the so-called President House was owned by who? It was signed under the Declaration of Independence Constitution by the name of Robert who? Robert Mars, the leading slave from Liverpool, England. the firm of Mars and Willing. You know where Willing Alley is? Willing Alley is still here. It's a small street. They sold more enslaved Africans than any other area in Philadelphia. So he owned the house. Although Washington owned enslaved Africans. Yes, there should have been honor for our ancestors, but not, we're the only group that I know of who rebuilt a place that harbored and killed and raped their ancestors. We won a memorial. Know where I won the memorial? Right next to the Liberty Bell. The Liberty Bell don't mean a damn thing to me, because I know the history. Some of you are shocked, aren't you? They were scrapped the Liberty Bell. For African Americans in Philadelphia, know what? Whenever our people went down to Independence Mall, July 4th, what's today's date? A few weeks ago, they were chased away. They were chased away. There was a niggers, and this is the word, is that niggers never contribute anything to our history. So what do they celebrate? Our people?
Juneteenth?
Nope, because later. Juneteenth came later. This is real late. Come on, wake up. Who's from the Caribbean here? Who's the Caribbean roots? Emancipation of the West Indies. Emancipation of what? The British West Indies. That was their holiday. The African Americans weren't permitted to celebrate the 4th of July. Bring the lawyer, take me to court. Take me to court. But what I'm saying to you, yes, there were enslaved Africans, only judge and others in the house. But there was also enslaved Africans who were assembled at Independence Mall and Washington Square. Why Washington Square? Because every year they would gather together when African Americans controlled Washington Square. They would have their last day of celebration with different festivals and dancing and all before they were sold. So today, try to move around that area. You were not even permitted there. Then the London Coffee, we put a marker there. They used to sell enslaved African in the back. So what I'm saying, when you hear Philadelphia, it didn't have a history. Go back to my teacher again. Going back to the new statute of Robeson and all this. I thought at the time, here I'm standing nude from a well-known sculpture, 98 years old. I said, they sold our people right here in the city, nude, men and women. Yeah. So then another thing that teased me off too, I always liked art and history and so forth. I had the opportunity to work with the third member of the year at the Museum of Art. What teased me off, and I wanted to have a march. I told Cody Anderson, a couple other people, there's 2 or 3 months to organize a march from Penn's Landing to the steps. What steps?
The Art Museum.
Why the Art Museum?
Because of a bell, Julian Abel.
What's his name again?
Julian Abel.
Julian Abel.
Abel, okay.
That's right. Who was he?
He designed the Art Museum.
And what else did he design? Free Library?
Oh, the Parkway Center, the main branch.
The main branch?
Yes.
4 buildings at Duke University, and the Widener Library at Harvard. He also was a painter. So I said, have them mark, not the Rocky steps. What the Rocky has to do with it? Why not organize a parade from the river, from the sea, from the river, Delaware River, Pennsylvania, to the museum? Everyone else have their marches, even the mummers. The only reason, I think, I better knock on wood, I think there might be two or three other ones. I'm one of the remaining founders of the African American Museum of Philadelphia. What's that? When did that start?
70, it was in the 70s.
In the 70s, you're right.
Early 70s.
75?
You're getting close.
76.
Why 76? Well, we started 3 years before because we wanted to have it ready. Clarence Farmer, Gerard Williams, and all the rest of the people who were involved with it. We said, we'll select a place near Mother Bethel Church. Why? We're going back. Then the cry went out, we don't want these niggers down here The original museum was supposed to be the plot at Mother Bethel Church owned, that little plot area down there. So we said we'll have it in '73, have it in time for the bicentennial. Rizzo at the time was building a what? What kind of museum? Come on, wake up. The Mummers Museum.
Oh.
The Mummers, they still have the Mummer Parade, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
They march to the tune of what?
Golden Goals.
Who wrote it? This man here. See him on the wall? James A. Bland. I told Kenny Gamble, Dr. Turner, tell you, when Kenny had an event here, about 3 months
weeks ago.
A few weeks ago.
Yeah, during Black Music Month.
I had Kenny stand, I said, Kenny, I want you to come over here, stand next to this picture. I said, I'll tell you why. This man was just as popular as you were during this time. He wrote nearly over 200 songs. James A. Bland, he wrote the theme song to the Mummer Parade. What's the theme song to the Mummer Parade?
Golden Goals.
I can't hear you, brother.
Oh, damn golden.
All those golden slippers to the tune of a black man. James A. Bland. James A. Bland's father was his third African-American graduate from college. But here Kenny Gamble and Bland lived on the same area, South Philadelphia. And this photograph came to me. Every piece of art, books I could give a story on almost everyone. The photograph there, and the late president, a good friend of mine, who's no longer Peter Lear Coors, president of Lear Coors, said, Charlie, he said, do me a favor, there's a man who has a picture of a Negro, of an African American in his restaurant in South Philly, where they sell steaks and all. He said he wanted to know who it is. So I went down there, identified, and he gave me that photograph. That's Bland. Someone tore his house was nearly torn down, but they laid on the floor. So this is the original James A. what?
Bland.
So this is where I'm telling you where my items, I dominated, Stephanie. You asked me some more questions.
No, I mean, that, look at all the history we got from one question, right? One of the things I'm curious about, though, is that you began so early in your collecting. Now, there are folks today, you know, in our modernization, we have storage facilities where people can, you know, hold these things. But you were a student, so you were moving in and out of the dorms and everything else. How did you even physically hold on to these precious items until you were able to work out your relationships with Penn State and with Temple in order to formalize your collections?
Well, as I said, my father had a business, and we lived on Lafayette Street near the railroad tracks, and Schuylkill River, Norristown, and all that. So one day, or 1 year, he bought a house next to us. I'm the oldest of 8. So he bought a house next door and he rented it out. Then in the house, he set up a little library, a room for his books. So he was in the antiques and rare books. So he built a section, he gave me a section of the property for my trophies and all the other my books. So I stored them there. One time I hid them under my bed, in the attic, whatever. You always find places for books that you love. So later, during my travels and all, after I got out of the service, although I was in the Army, I didn't do too much soldiering because when I went to Fort Dix, they pulled my records and said, you do the basic training, but we want you for the football team. Then I went overseas, I was a football coach, played in Japan, Korea. Then I was on the track team, came back. So this is where, then I worked for Norristown Area School District, and I found a little place, a little apartment for my books. So everywhere I went, not only books, but documents, papers,
Yes.
postcards, whatever it is. People had to try to, those who found, I said, what do they collect the little colored Negro stuff for? But now, after many years, I was encouraged. Sometimes I felt lonely, but only when I thought that I was still lonely, it was not really too much. I would get on the train before I started driving, go to New York, go to see Mr. Michel. That's Memorial Bookstore. And all kinds of people. Another good friend who we met, I read his column every week, Stephanie, you and your friend Herb Boyd.
Yes.
Herb is from Detroit, Michigan. He writes for International News. I read his column every week. So I used to go to the Teresa Hotel. You ever heard of the Teresa Hotel?
Mm-hmm.
No, you did. Who's heard of Teresa?
It was in New York.
That's right. What happened there? Everybody went there. Everybody.
I remember
NBC,
Little Richard talking about it. Yes.
Everybody. Charlie Rangel and all the musicians and all the most beautiful African-American women you ever want to see, because they all congregate. Joe Lewis, Sugar Ray Robinson. It was a place to be. This is like Pep's Bar. Where's Pep's? Showboat.
Lombard Street.
Where else?
15th and Lombard.
How about Spider Kelly's? You're not him. Come on. He's a jazz player. My good friend, next door neighbor, well, 2 doors away. I was born 2 doors away from where he lived. He used to play all the time. He became known as the world famous jazz organist, Jimmy Smith.
Yes.
What do you know about Jimmy Smith?
Just jazz, Philadelphia jazz history. I'm not a Philly native, so I didn't get all of my cool. I had to acquire it when I got here.
I was born 3 houses from where he lived. I know his brother was Curator, and his father, the whole family. Jimmy used to come to Philly. Used to hear him. I used to go up to Newport Jazz Festival, Folk Festival. You ever went to New York, Newport, with Nina Simone? Remember Nina Simone started out, they gave her a hard time in Philly. I used to go to another favorite place I live about 10 miles from now, New Hope.
Yeah.
Oh, because it reminded me of the village in Cape Cod. Guess who was over there? A woman by the name of Nina who? Simone. She was, then we used to go down to Lang City. We used to hate to go to Chicken Bone what?
Beach.
Where was Chicken Bone Beach? Come on, wake up. Chicken Bone Beach, they were segregated. Lang City was segregated. Before we would drive, I learned to drive, and always had buses and so forth. Every now and then, people from all over would go to Chicken. They had a special area with a rope and dogs, police, to separate black people. But then they had a place, and Chicken Bone Beach, among our own people from all over, they called Glamour's Row. Why Glamour Row? Come on, wake up.
Like Driver's Row?
No, Glamour.
Yeah.
Almost like that, but where all the beautiful women are congregated. We have pictures of the Mosley Collection, John Mosley Collection. John Mosley was a great photographer. I have his items that show all those pictures of Chicken Bone Beach and Glamour's Row. Although it was segregated, we congregated together. Why do they call it Chicken Bone Beach? Come on.
People ate chicken.
They ate chicken.
Yeah, it was they brought it in baskets and what have you, right?
That's right. They came from all over. Then another place called Roseville Beach, down in Delaware. We had our own areas because in spite of segregation. So even then, older people, African-American people, soon learned that I was collecting, and they would give me safe things for me. So over the years, I inherited a lot of materials. So it's over 800,000 items in this collection today. And I have another in my University of Penn State in my name. And I don't say too much, but I still have another collection in my house.
as we would assume, because it started that personal. And so, of course, you have a personal collection that you hold on to. But what you've just spoken about, this idea of inheriting, and how people would save things for you because they knew that you would treasure them and you would find a way to keep our interest and passion for this information going because of your own personal passion. That's part of the reason why we wanted to have this Q&A today and why we wanted to invite other people, is our responsibility as a community to continue to preserve collections like yours and what our families may be holding on to that we have not created a plan for yet, right? There are some people that still have those big, beautiful photo albums that they have not preserved those images yet, or the documents that have been handed down, these family Bibles that contain our family histories. What advice can you give to everyone who's assembled here today about how to begin thinking archivally, the way you have almost your whole life, about preserving these things?
Stranger brought it up, Stephanie, just before we got started here. A good friend of Ed Robinson was just here, you met her. She, you know what she wanted? She wanted to inform me that she has all of Ed Robinson items, Dr. Ed Robinson. She wanted to donate them to the collection here.
Beautiful.
So Ed and I were friends. He's come to my house, him and his photographer and all. We used to talk about books and so forth. And so, but I never knew. I remember his music records. He was talking about Black Rhapsody and all. So one thing led to another. Over the years, people such as the late Judge Raymond Pace Alexander and his wife Sadie Alexander, judges and all. I met so many people who donated things to me. And being here in Temple now, it came to this point, it came to the time when I have all these things in my house. They can't remain, they shouldn't remain here. So during the 70s, even before the museum, I told the museum, African-American, it was called the Afro-American Museum. I said, just build me a section, a section. I'll donate it to you. They said, oh, so we'll get to that, we'll get to that. The only history of the museum written about it, I wrote so far. When I was asked to write a history, a complete history of it, most people are gone. What I'm saying to you now is that I said, just build me the museum, I mean, a place to house the collection. Then, University of Pennsylvania wanted it. They were having trouble at Penn. Then another favorite place who gave me an honorary degree, which was my beloved, I had a football and track scholarship, Lincoln University. They wanted it. And then my university, at the beginning, Penn State, they were him and Hahn, they wanted it. Then the Free Library. Remember Gussie Clark? She was involved there. She wanted it. So I decided, Dr. Lawrence Reddick. Who was Dr. Lawrence Reddick? Lord have mercy. You ever heard the Schomburg collection? The Schomburg? He took, when Arthur Schomburg, my hero, besides Robeson, when he passed away, the person who took his place was Dr. Lawrence Reddick.
Okay.
Then Dr. Reddick came to Temple here. He was the first head of the African-American collection, long before Dr. Asante came and others. So what I'm saying to you, Dr. Reddick, when I came to my house, when Temple had trouble. We're in this room today. We're having controversy with Temple in the beginning. When Temple finally decided to donate to Temple because of the controversy, before Asante came and others. First of all, was 1983. And President, of course, said Charlie will hold it the date until 1984. Why 1984? To correspond with what? The founding of Temple University was founded what year? 100 years ago, 1884. So he said, we'll hold it up. So they put me, my friend Sharon Holly, who was here, she'll tell you, she's here today. I haven't seen her for a long while, but she came here today. They put me up in the third floor of the Bailey Library, way in the back with the stack. So, you know what I went through. Then later on, they moved me into the other part of the building here. This one day, a couple of times, I'm on this same floor. Part of this area we're in here now is connected to the first part of the building. The ceiling, the water came through the second floor, missed the first floor, came through the window. There was books, as my friend Sharon can tell you. One time I came in on a weekend, there were books floating all over. Among the books and documents, you ever hear of Senator Edward Brooks? Come on, wake up. Who was he, Stephanie?
Is he the first black?
That's right. His papers that I purchased were floating in the hallway.
Oh.
Guess what else? Don't get me started. Who was the first woman to publish a book of poems?
Phyllis Wheatley.
You're right. I had 2 copies of signed by Phyllis Wheatley.
Wow.
What, don't tell me what. I came in one day, the rain, the water, the book, her book and poem was floating on the floor. The title page was destroyed. The signature she did was gone. I had to replace it. We have the same copy here, but now I got another title page. But my other title page, other copy, is at Penn State, signed by Phyllis Wheatley, who haunted me for years, but I couldn't afford her. And I first bought it from a friend of mine from Massachusetts, Howard Mott and his wife. They called me one day and said, "Charlie, we have something for you. We have a signed copy of Phyllis Wheatley." And why was Phyllis Wheatley important? Even Schaumburg, when a dealer Charles Hartman wanted to sell Arthur Schaumburg a copy of Phyllis Wheatley for $350. That was a lot of money back in the late 1930s.
Yeah.
Guess what was it made of? A book of her poem was made of the skin of a young black girl, bound in human skin. Bound in human skin. So Schaumburg came in halls and all, because he had a feeling for Phyllis Wheatley poetry, broadside and books and all. So he couldn't find it. So it ended up at Texas Southern University, the Black University. Then it was lost. But I cried. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, I cried when I seen her poem floating on the water and other things. So then they were gonna move me. They thought they were. My friend Sharon would tell you. Remember Sharon? He was before Sandy, but Sandy was here and other people were here. Right on the front steps you come in here, they was gonna move me from this building over to where? Cecil B. Moore Avenue. I said, like hell. So we all came together and they pleaded with me. Then my friend Zachary Rose and other women and all the others said, no, they had the black flag. They was gonna close Broad Street down. Remember, Sharon?
Yeah, you acted up. That's what
That's right. There's no way they was gonna do that. Then I was told, thank you for stopping it. I didn't want the community to suffer because of that. So they finally settled down. So this is where we are today.
Yeah.
So there's the history behind all of this.
I mean, you know, we've got this beautiful statue looking over us as we prepare to wrap up this conversation. But what you just talked about in terms of with everything that you've managed to maintain, there have been losses. And so, you know, we want to drive home to everyone in this room the images that I've been able to compile from my uncle's outtakes collection only exist because I had an opportunity while I was in DC helping to tend to my father's last days to digitize that entire collection because we had flooding in the home that we were preparing to sell, and mold and mildew destroyed a lot. So these are digital reprints that you're looking at today. And these two that I brought with me, Dr. Blockson, I'm leaving with you.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll talk more, you know, just about the provenance of the images themselves. But these are two Philadelphia-related images that I wanted to bring to help look over our Q&A session today. For the benefit of those of you who can't see them directly, we have an image of C. Dolores Tucker in very close counsel with President Jimmy Carter. At a function at the White House. And, you know, to me, this image is just indicative of her stick-to-itiveness. I mean, you know, there are very few people who would feel that comfortable being that close to a sitting U.S. president and holding them in conversation the way she obviously was in this image. So that's one of my favorites. Just over here, we have Pearl Bailey, along with my Uncle Maurice, who's in the dark glasses on the far right. I don't know who the other gentleman is, but Pearl Bailey is of particular significance to me because, of course, all of your work with historical markers around the city. The historical marker for Pearl Bailey is right around 22nd and Berks, where her home was. And I used to be an instructor for Project Home and their teen program. And those kids used to go to the bodega on the corner for their little dollar hoagies every day. and come into the program and pay no attention to that historical marker. So as the digital video instructor, when we went out to the community to shoot that, I had to have class around this historical marker. Like, do you have any idea who this woman is and how important she was to early Black images in film and in recordings? And so we had a Pearl Bailey class because of their proximity to this history that they wouldn't have known if it wasn't for the work that you have done to have these historical markers erected all throughout our city to make sure that as we honor this incredible city and all of its legacy, that we don't forget the African Americans who were significant to that history as well. So I particularly wanted to make sure that Pearl Bailey made her way here.
And also,
to you.
Dolores was a good friend of mine. She has a marker too, you know.
Yes.
Quite a woman.
So, you know, in addition to this collection, maybe we'll let your final words be around the effort that you have put into making sure those navy blue and gold markers have been erected around the city to capture so much of that history for us to continue to.
I'm only a conduit. I would look at myself as a conduit. I'm going to pass one day. It comes from me as a conduit to collect, preserve, and to disseminate our history. It's not about me. I'm only a conduit, like you are. Hold on to your ancestors, your family items, family Bibles, whatever it is. Hold on to it. If you don't know where to donate them, bring them here or someplace, somewhere to preserve them. Because through my collection, when my teacher told me that we didn't have a history. Look where my searching is. I'm a Sagittarian. I was born on a searching star, so I'm natural for collecting. I would do that until the day I died, because there's always something where you go, where our history is so important. You don't know who you are unless you honor the ancestors. I'm more to say this, it's important to always honor the woman. The woman. Up until recent years, I've forgotten the contribution of women. Women paid their way. I would never thought in my life, this is the last thing I'm going to say, when one day I received, about 4 years ago, in the mail, a letter addressed to me. I opened it up, and tears came to my eyes, and I said, God, why me? It was a letter from Mrs. Worling Wilkins, the great niece of Harry Tubman. It said, all of my Aunt Harriet, 39 items, the shawl that Queen Victoria gave her, presented to her handbook, the bottle, a copy of the bottle that she christened her warship, and other papers belong to you. And I said, God, why me? And then I said, I prayed, and people said, well, why don't you sell it? I would rather go to hell 10 times than just sell it. How would you even think about selling our ancestors? Did I come from that slavery time and others? So I prayed and said, the new museum at Washington, D.C., the African American Museum, Paul, excuse me, not Paul, but Lonnie Bunch,
Yes.
came to my house a couple of times. I also donated some African sculptures, thanks to him. Then these people said, why didn't you sell it? I wish the Lord would strike my grave 1,000 times. How can you sell the legacy of a woman like that? How can you sell that? I would never do that. So if you go to D.C. now, the new museum, my daughter Noelle is going down there. She was down there before. She's going down tomorrow again with a friend of hers, and she's going to stop by the item, the sign that where it's presented of Harry Tubman. Have you been down there near to Washington, D.C.? Who all been down there? How do you feel?
I feel wonderful that it's there, that we can go there to see all of our history.
That's right. Who else raised their hand? The last thing for sure. It's crazy. All that goes around comes around. We were talking, Stephanie, myself, and others were talking about a young boy by the name of, what was his name? He was He was murdered.
Oh,
And
Emmett
Mr.
Till.
Emmett Till. What are they doing now? Even today, this morning papers, what's happening?
They're trying to-
What's happening?
They have more information.
They're reopening the case, aren't they?
Yes.
There's the God. When I was down there in D.C., I cried again. At the casket, because I remember, there's so much. Standing in 1955, the year that he was assassinated, killed. We were playing a football game at Penn State, I think it was homecoming. Rosie Graham, myself, Lenny Moore, and Jesse Arnell, 4 blacks on a team. And talking about singing the national anthem, I don't sing the national anthem today, because I know the story behind it. No, when they were playing, I was humming the black national anthem. That was the same year that they took the life of this young boy. What was his name?
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till. So there's the history.
Yeah. Well, I am so humbled and thankful that you decided to come hold class today. And I hope that everyone else feels as enriched as I do by our conversation. If you're holding on to that family history, if you, like me, have been the designated one to carry it on, then please spend some time today or in the very near future thinking about what your plan is to preserve it. Because you never know when an act of God may happen in the space where you are holding it that may destroy it. So as much as we can, we talk about digitizing and redundancy. All right, so it's not just enough to scan it and have it one place, because if that one place has a fire or a flood or some other thing, then you still lose it ultimately. So digitizing and then redundancy. Have it on 2 or 3 or 4 hard drives and distribute them. Let other people in your family, share some of that responsibility of holding on to these things, and then know that external drives fail. Right? The technology is constantly being revised. So every few years, you just need to think about how you're going to copy it again, either onto the latest technology or how you're going to, clone the drive, whatever's necessary, put it in the cloud, all these things in order to make sure that we have the opportunity to pass these things on from generation to generation. And if you have the opportunity to donate to a collection, like the Blockson Collection, then that's also something to consider, because that way you get university and university resources involved in trying to keep these things preserved for the next generations to come. But everyone has a role in preserving it and sharing it. And so you're also encouraged, as a part of the photographic memory exhibit, we're doing a collective archive. So if you've got a photo or two of something, and particularly, as Dr. Blockson has, with an emphasis on Philadelphia and all this wonderful history, then we'd love to have that, especially if it's contemporary history within the last 50 years, let's say. And you have those photos, or if you have something on your phone, we would like to be able to collect that and do a presentation of some of this collective history as a part of this exhibit. Aaron Levy from Slought is here. And so, he is my partner, my co-conspirator in this process. And so feel free to grab us as we wrap up and talk a little bit more about that. The actual exhibit of my Uncle Maurice's work is at Slought, which is at 4017 Walnut Street. And you are encouraged to come by. It's up until July 21st. So come take a look at the photos. I've recorded a guided tour, so even if I'm not around, you can listen on the sound system and get some background on some of the photos as well. But just to celebrate in all of our abilities to contribute to collective history and the responsibility that we have as well, that is embodied in this wonderful treasure sitting next to me, Dr. Charles L. Blockson. Can we put our hands together for him? And so thank you so much for coming out and being a part of this event, and find out more information about how to come back. If this is your first time here in the Blockson Collection, find out about their hours, find out about what is contained in this collection, and continue to support its presence here on Temple University's campus. Thank you so much.